Hey y'all, my name is Leftover Donuts, and yes, so this is a channel dedicated to fish with a PH. This thing is, I made it for like fish nerds, fish novices, everyone in between, and I'm certainly one of those ones who's in between. I'm an enthusiast, but not an expert, so please, please, please do not come for me in the comments. Tonight, I just wanted to start by covering the first two shows of Summer Tour in Huntsville, Alabama. So we opened with Blaze On, which for me is like a standard opener with a nice arena rock jam, and the Play It Leo solo, which I always listen for because I'm a little bit of a piano nut. I really dug that. Then was Martian Monster, which the groove, I really love this groove. In my opinion, I think it needs to be jammed out more often, sort of kind of the way it was in its debut. These next few I'm going to group together, not because I didn't like them necessarily, they just didn't strike a particular chord with me. We've got MoMA, Haley's, 46 Days, Back on the Train, and 555. For me, these songs, in terms of song choice, it's like standard tour opening stuff. Yeah, it was all really good. It just didn't strike a particular chord. One thing I just want to flag up, though, because it's one of these fish mysteries that I've always kind of been wondering about. No clear lyrics for Haley's comment online, like nothing definitive. And I think that he might be saying Jews at one point, referring to Jews as in Judaism, when he says, I know deep inside they've got some mighty fine. And it sounds like he's saying Jews, but I don't know. I'm having a hard time hearing how it could be anything else. But please sound off in the comments what your opinions are if you have any insider information as to what that lyric actually is. Be very interested in knowing. Okay, next up in this set was You Enjoy Myself, which I was surprised to hear in the first set of the tour opening show. I think it was really strong work from Mike Gordon on the bass, and it sort of looks like the vocal jam is back and here to stay, so you can take that for what it's worth. Say It To Me Santos to close out the first set of Summer Tour. So they do play this a lot nowadays, but it's kind of hard to get tired of it. I think it's a great closer for a set or a show, even when it's in its standard, kind of non-adventurous version. Beginning set two of night one. This was 2001, which I was surprised to hear this open set two. Down with Disease was next, and I have to admit, I get a little tired of like the main song, but it almost always leads to a jam. And for me, this was probably the jam of the night. I think it went to a lot of different places. These next three, again, I'm going to group together. Twist and Maze and Lonely Trip. I think these are all like just really strong songs. And well, Twist and Maze specifically with kind of the standard jams on the back of them. I quite liked it. Next up is Oblivion. This was kind of like a, what is this moment for me? I was like, I don't recognize this. It's because it's one of Trey's new songs. I hadn't heard it before. I'm kind of excited to hear where they take this one because it already seems like they're kind of jamming it out. And to sort of mention that, like, I feel like some of the jams for like older songs, like much older Phish standards like Reba and David Bowie over recent years have gotten like a little more honed in, don't venture outward as much as they used to. So it's good to hear some new songs with some already present jamming potential. And then to close out the first show proper of Summer Tour 2023, we had Chalk Dust. I thought this was kind of for the composed parts at least, kind of a hot mess. They weren't really together for a lot of it, the four guys. But I do feel like some of the most interesting jamming here, it seems to emerge from mistakes. Sometimes when they make mistakes or they fumble something, it often on the back of that, they end up with a really interesting jam. I don't know if that's coincidence or if there is something to that. But for me, the back of this thing was some of the most adventurous stuff of the night and a solid show closer. I thought it was like noisy, chaotic, and beautiful, and I ended up really loving it. So sometimes even when it's not perfect, it still becomes really interesting and very memorable. And so I think set list wise, this encore is kind of the headline of the night. If you're looking at the set list, these songs are the ones that stick out to you, even though musically they're not the most remarkable sections of the night. But I did think that Meat Stick and Maki Supa, of all the songs in the encore, these were sort of being expanded upon in kind of interesting ways. Followed that up with Fuck Your Face into Iculus, which to me was just anarchic mayhem. And I think I was worried, having not heard the next night yet, that Trey was gonna blow his voice out on Iculus because he was really screaming and shouting that all that stuff. But I thought that the spirit of those two was really cool. And then close out with a sort of a prototypical Character Zero. It's not always a terrible choice for a closer, but tonight it felt safe in its approach and a little disappointing after the craziness of the prior 4 songs and some of the adventurousness of that jamming, especially in the second set. Okay, going on to night 2. On this night, I think they kind of doubled down on the arena rock sound and widened up the song choice a little bit. The Plasma, I thought, was a welcome change for the opener. I found it sinister, playful, foreboding. Sigma Oasis, this is a song that I have incredibly mixed feelings about the lyrics, about all of it. That being said, I thought it was a monster jam on the end of it. It went to some really weird places. It got a little kind of plinky dinky with Trey's guitar. Wolfman's into Evolve. I thought this stuff was standard. It was good. It didn't really strike a chord with me. Evolve is not that good of a song, but it's so, I don't know, it's just so absurd and kind of upbeat that you bop along to it, and it's sort of a little funny and kind of, it's got a weird tone to it. So then we got Mull, which I think some people nowadays like to hate on the mic tunes, but the guy can really pen a catchy earworm. And I think the biggest headline, maybe in the first set, but definitely here, is this perfect segue that they did into bouncing around the room. I thought that one moment was really, really cool. And then we get Stash. I think it'd be really interesting, again, I'm not an expert here, but it'd be interesting to track this song's evolution from its debut in the early 90s until today. The feeling that I get is that some of these recent Stashes do, like this one, kind of modulate to the major partway through before cycling back, if they do decide to close out the song, before it cycles back to kind of the minor, more sinister eruption that comes at the end. And I sort of am missing a little bit of the ones that are just like straight sinister all the way through, and some kind of build up that end with the symmetrical like closing out of that song that maybe so, maybe not, chanting almost. So I'd be curious if anybody watching this, anybody in the comments, can give me recommendations for any recent Stashes that kind of stayed at that kind of type 1 sort of like sinister, very sinister nature, and close out in that kind of beautiful, very satisfying way. The set closed out with a David Bowie. And I do think that given the anarchy inherent to this freaking ridiculousness that we call a song, I think it'd be nice to hear it go outside its scope a little bit, which, like some other Phish standards, like Reba, as I was mentioning earlier, it seems to have become very prescribed in the latter years of 3.0 to 4.0. I still think it was a solid set closer, and sometimes the simplicity is good. I thought it was good here. Going into set 2, Wave of Hope. This is one of Trey's newer songs that I like better than a lot of the other ones, frankly, as a song. They got a nice jam that went out of the end of it, but I think it got ripcorded into Fuego too soon, and he sometimes does this where he's a little too eager to wrap things up and get to the next thing, and I thought this was an example of like the jam was just starting to take off, and then he kind of disrupted it. But Fuego, which is again, another ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous song. But Fuego and Piper had some really nice, adventurous jam segments. I thought it was some of the best stuff in the 2 nights. Ether Edge, which was this next one, which, again, I had not heard. And it seemed to be taking the Oblivion spot from the previous night. It seems like, based on what happened in Alpharetta the first night, that we're going to get more of these second set placements with a new kind of Trey song. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see where it goes. Mercury, the penultimate slot of the night. I thought this had a great jam on the end. It was nice to hear this being jammed out more again. The main song is like the primary song is such an evolution. There's a big song on the front of it. And usually when it's a big song, like Lizards, for example, or even Fluffhead, it often does not get jammed out. But Mercury is one of these ones that is like a prog song. And then even after that 7 minutes, 8 minutes of the main song, there's still more life to it. They can still do more with it. And, I thought it was a great jam. And then final slot was Free, and I thought this was a rare closing spot for Free. It was nice, robust, funky, and kind of an arena-y jam on the end of this thing. I really liked it. I thought it was really good, and it's nice to hear that song not in the first set and have it be serving a different purpose. Okay, and the Encore Alumni Blues with the Jimmy Page sandwich in there is a nice fun nod to the PhD thing. I like this. Feels like a classic kind of bluesy comic tune. And then Run Like an Antelope, which the position I take on Antelope is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Antelope ain't broke, even when it stays strictly to what it is, like does not venture outside of the traditional Antelope format. It's very good. And there's nothing that needs to really be done with it beyond just the musical ingenuity and the experimentation that they're just going to bring to that format. Anyway, that's all I have. Feel free to sound off on the comments, anything you think, anything you disagree with. And this has been Leftover Donuts. Thank you very much.